Horror games have become a huge part of the gaming world, and as you'd expect, there are some real gems out there. We've put together a list of the 20 scariest games that are absolutely worth your time. Let's dive right into it. I'm your guide today, and this is our countdown. Number 10. Visage fear is deeply personal. What terrifies one person might not even faze another, and sometimes a game that isn't even marketed as horror can still leave you trembling. With Visage, there's no consensus on just how scary it is. Some people call it the scariest game they've ever played, while others found it underwhelming. This non-linear game lets you experience its different chapters in almost any order. Those who stumble into the Dolores chapter first tend to be the most shaken, while others who start elsewhere might not be as scared. It's a game inspired by PT, with an eerie, hyper-realistic environment and obscure progression that leaves many players feeling lost. Whether it strikes you as frustrating or thrilling, it's one of those games that horror fans need to at least try, even if just for its incredible atmosphere and tension-filled moments. Number 9. Dead Space Remake. The original Dead Space is already considered a horror classic, but the remake? It takes everything up a notch. While it takes inspiration from Resident Evil 4 with a focus on third-person action and inventory management, it never loses its horrifying edge. Even with all the upgrades and weapons you have, the sheer intensity and cosmic horror of the Ishimura, a claustrophobic spaceship, remains unmatched. The psychological aspect of the game, particularly the mental unraveling of Isaac Clarke, is more pronounced in the remake, making the horror hit even harder. The game's use of sound and lighting is masterful, keeping you constantly on edge. If you're a fan of sci-fi horror, this one is unmissable. Number 8. Outlast. Outlast came out at a time when people were craving helpless horror experiences like Amnesia and Slender Man, and it delivered. You play as a journalist exploring Mount Massive Asylum with nothing but a camera to document the horrors you encounter. The asylum is teeming with unpredictable and brutal inmates, and your only option is to hide or run. The unpredictable nature of these lunatics combined with the intense atmosphere makes Outlast one of the most terrifying games around. It's relentless in its gross-out horror and jump scares, but the overall tension is enough to leave most players breathless. Number 7. Amnesia: The Bunker. The latest entry in the Amnesia series changes things up, offering a more open-ended, resource-driven horror experience. Set in a World War I bunker, you must escape while avoiding a terrifying, unpredictable monster. Unlike previous games, you have a few tools to defend yourself, but they come with limitations. The bunker's confusing layout and the scarcity of resources force you to think carefully about every move. The game's claustrophobic setting and the constant threat of danger create an unrelenting sense of dread. Number 6. Anatomy. Anatomy proves that a game doesn't need jump scares or monsters to be terrifying. This 20-minute game is as simple as it gets. Wander through a dark house, collect tapes, and listen to some disturbing narration. But despite its simplicity, Anatomy is incredibly unnerving. It builds tension by making you expect something to happen, but it never does, leaving you in a state of unease the entire time. If you let yourself get immersed, it becomes one of the most frightening experiences you can have in gaming. Number 5. Devotion. Devotion deserves more attention than it gets, largely due to a controversy that led to its removal from digital stores. Now available directly from the developer's website, this psychological horror game focuses on a father reliving the haunting memories of his sick daughter. Without giving too much away, the story is deeply unsettling and lingers in your mind long after you finish. There are no jump scares here, but the emotional weight and disturbing story make it one of the most memorable horror games out there. Number 4. Signalis. A modern throwback to classic survival horror, Signalis blends elements of Resident Evil, Silent Hill, and even a touch of Fear Effect in a cyberpunk setting. The game is deliberately vague, leaving you questioning everything, from the world around you to the very character you're playing. Combat is scarce, but tension is always high as you have limited resources and space in your inventory. Its dreamlike, eerie atmosphere makes it both a love letter to old-school horror and a fresh, terrifying experience in its own right. Number 3. The Evil Within. The Evil Within is a chaotic, gory ride that never lets up. It's tough, disorienting, and unapologetically brutal. You play as a detective trying to survive in a world filled with monstrous, grotesque creatures, all while contending with limited ammo and supplies. It's a mix of Resident Evil 4 gameplay and Silent Hill's disturbing visuals. While it's not perfect, its intense, overwhelming atmosphere makes it one of the scariest games on this list. Number 2. Condemned: Criminal Origins. This 360 launch title remains one of the most terrifying games ever made. Set in a series of rundown, abandoned locations, you spend most of the game fending off psychotic enemies with whatever makeshift weapons you can find. The combat is raw and brutal, but it's the locations, like an abandoned department store or a dilapidated school, that really stick with you. The oppressive atmosphere and unpredictable enemies make Condemned a horror classic. Number 1. Resident Evil 7. Resident Evil 7 was the reboot the series needed, bringing back the horror that had been missing in recent installments. Set in a deranged, decaying house, you must face off against the Baker family, a twisted group of sadistic killers. The first-person perspective and the return to a more confined, oppressive environment make Resident Evil 7 one of the scariest games in the series. Play it in VR if you really want to test your nerves. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the Lagging Times channel. I'll see you in the next video, where the news might be a bit behind, but it's always worth the wait.